This is episode 115 of the Death to Tyrants podcast. Hey guys, let me tell you about the sponsor for today's show, and that is Lorenzotti Coffee. Oh my goodness, it is so damn good. I kid you not, I've found myself the last few mornings waking up earlier than normal just because I'm so excited to drink this coffee that the guys sent me. It is so good. Let me tell you about them really quick. They basically import coffee from a roaster in Naples. Well, now they've got it on their website. You can order it. It is so damn good. They've got ground, whole bean, anything you like over there. And trust me, you won't be disappointed. I do it in the French press. That's how I make my coffee every morning. And I'm so stoked to have these guys as a sponsor. They love liberty. They love the Death to Tyrants podcast. And so we should support them, right? We want the good people to get our money. And when you go over to lorenzotti.coffee, that's LORENZOTTI.coffee, and you use our promo code at checkout, DTTP, for the Death to Tyrants podcast, you get 10% off your order. And they are not expensive, guys, but boy, it tastes expensive. You will not be disappointed. Our sponsor, Lorenzotti Coffee, LORENZOTTI.coffee. Go check them out and use promo code DTTP at checkout. Let's get to the show.
The crushing weight of the tyrant's passage had left nothing unmarked.
You get split in fucking half, but I call him the hologram graph. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid, and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back once again to the Death to Tyrants podcast. As always, I am your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson, coming to you out of Austin, Texas, yet again. It's damn hot here. Why can't we have weather like California, where my guest is from? Why? Because it'd be even more expensive than it already is here in Austin. But speaking of that, yeah, I've got Thaddeus Russell on the show today. I'm stoked to have him on. A lot of you guys probably know who he is. If you don't, well, you certainly will by the end of this. You'll know some things about him that he's never said before on any format. It's neat. I get some stuff out of him that no one else has. And a little bit embarrassingly, you get some stuff out of me that no one else has either. And I won't give away any secrets yet. But we get into, we go through Thaddeus's political, intellectual journey throughout the years. He says in here, he was born into socialism and grew up being an avowed Marxist socialist for years and years and years. So he knows that the progressive left inside and out, that mindset. And he, had an awakening, as some people call it. And he's not a socialist anymore. He's also not a libertarian. And we get into just why not. I was stoked to finally be able to ask him this and get it on record. We get into the cultural wars going on, the possible split coming in the Democratic Party, the identity politics, BLM, all of this good stuff, the lockdowns and the masks and all of that. We hit upon much of it, and I think you're going to enjoy this chat with Thaddeus Russell. He's the founder and CEO of Renegade University. He is the host of the Unregistered podcast, and he is the author of A Renegade History of the United States. He's here with us on Death to Tyrants. Thaddeus Russell, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm so excited to be here, Buck. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's Renegade University, Renegade History of the United States, Unregistered with Thaddeus Russell. You're a busy guy.
Oh my God, you have no idea. It's funny. I was super busy building those things over the last 3 years. We launched both in May of 2017. But the quarantine I thought would be the death of us. It actually turned out, and this is no endorsement of the quarantine, because if you follow me, you know that I'm opposed to almost all of it. But it did turn out to be kind of good for us because instead of doing just in-person interviews, which is what I always did, because it does add an intimate quality to a podcast. I was forced to do Zoom, but that was also a good thing because then I didn't have to travel, which made it much easier to book really amazing guests and also to put out many more videos per week. So that was great. And then on top of that, it gave me the idea of adding these new shows that I think you've attended a couple, right?
I have, yes.
Are You Live and Unregistered Live, which are we have two groups. We have paid members of the Unregistered Supporting Listeners group, which is Unregistered Underground, and then we have Renegade University. So if you're a member of RU Lives every Tuesday night. You get to talk to a guest and me and each other, and it's amazing. And then Thursday nights is Unregistered Listeners, and that's just with me. It's an amazing hangout. Last night we went completely crazy. It was fun. But yeah, so I'm doing now 3 shows basically a week, while I am the CEO of, really it's 2 companies, because RU is its own company and Unregistered is a weekly podcast, which is pretty much a full-time job on its own.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, I'm writing a book.
Another book now.
Same book. I'm almost done. It's really, I'm writing the last chapter, but it's a serious history book. So it's very intense, but I love every single thing that I do in terms of the content. I'm also the director of content for everything. I do have like by now, like a really pretty big, awesome team of people who are helping in various ways. But I have my hands in almost every aspect of it. I have a partner who does he does the website, he does the technical stuff and a lot of the financial stuff, but pretty much everything else I've had at least a hand in it, or I've done it myself. So yeah, I've been a busy boy, especially in the last 4 months.
I'm stoked to have you on because you always make me think. Your takes are unique some of the time. And one of the things that's fascinating about you is your political background and the kind of quote unquote journey you've been through politically. Can you tell my listeners about that?
Yeah. So I was born in 1965 in Berkeley, California, which I'm sure a lot of you know was at that time, still is, pretty much the most left-wing town in America. And my parents were at that time in an organization called the International Socialists, which was a Trotskyist Marxist organization, revolutionary socialist organization. Trotskyism, in sort of shorthand, is simply it's the wing of the Bolsheviks who were ousted by and opposed Stalin, and Trotsky was assassinated by Stalin. But why is this important? It's important in that they were the revolutionary communists and Marxists who were opposed thoroughly to the Soviet Union and capital C communism around the world. And by the way, Buck, I've never explained that to anyone ever in public. This is an exclusive.
Yes.
I've never laid that out ever in all the years of and hundreds of podcasts. I've never said that to anybody. But that's a really important thing for me too, right? Because growing up, even though I was a socialist literally by birth, it was like being born into a church. In fact, no, it was being born into a church. Despite that, and despite believing all that stuff that I no longer believe in, and in fact I sort of believe the opposite, basically. But I never had any sympathy for actually existing communism because my parents didn't, and that's what they called it, actually existing communism. So the stuff that it actually, wherever socialism actually became real, they disowned, which, of course, calls into question socialism. But for me, it just meant, that it was never a problem in terms of like what my position on the Vietnam War would have been, even though I was 10 when it ended. But like, my position, unlike a lot of people on the left, was not to take the side of the Viet Cong and Ho Chi Minh, but simply to be on the side of the anti-war movement, or against the empire, basically. So they were never on the side of the communists in those battles. And then, like, for me, I came of age politically in the 1980s. And I was very much a left-wing socialist Marxist. I went to college basically to learn how to be a socialist because, like, when you're born into the church, right? Like, there's no questioning like whether there's a God, right? Like the most fundamental stuff. So it's not like I ever thought, there's a different way of thinking about things. But when I got to college, I actually, I'm kind of skipping back here, sorry. And when I got to college, there was something in me, I'm realizing these days, that it just simply was intellectualism, which is a love of ideas. That's all that means. It's a lover of ideas. That's what an intellectual is. So you don't have to have ever even read a book to be an intellectual, right? It's just someone who's interested in ideas. And that meant for me being interested in every idea. I mean, that is an intellectual, right? You're not an intellectual if you only read one newspaper with one point of view. If you only watch Fox and read National Review, or if you only watch MSNBC and read The Nation, that's not an intellectual. you're an ideologue. So something in me, I don't know why, even though I was fully committed to all of this left-wing politics when I was a freshman, something led me to the periodical stacks in the library on a regular basis. And I would go straight to the National Review and I would pull that off. It's this famous, very well-known, kind of the most important intellectual, conservative magazine in American history, really, at this point, still around. But it was founded, and at that point, it was still being edited by William F. Buckley, who was a brilliant guy. Straight up was brilliant. I mean, these days, most Republicans are kind of knuckleheads, but back then there were actually real conservatives who really could argue the shit out of any issue and could often win arguments with really smart left-wingers, which you never see anymore. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, at least I need to know the enemy, right? And so I pulled the National Review off the shelf, and I would sit there and I would go straight to Buckley's editorials, which were these beautifully crafted essays. I mean, he was a great writer, and he knew how to argue, and he knew how to write a political essay like nobody else. So I learned really how to write political essays from William F. Buckley. This is another thing, Buck, I've never said in public.
Yeah, I've never said this in public. I'm almost hesitant to now, but that's who I was named after.
Oh shit, that's hilarious.
Yeah. And I'm a Rothbardian through and through, and I was named after a man that hated him.
That's amazing. Oh wow. You must have listened to the Angela Keaton episode then.
I have not yet. No, I'm going to.
God. Oh my God. Yeah, that's the thing. Because her family was Rothbardians and they got destroyed by the Buckleyites. Mm-hmm. So she tells the story, and it's incredibly emotional too. So if you have some personal connection to that, it's an awesome episode. Yeah. So anyway, but even though Buckley was a warmongering, racist piece of shit, in terms of my values, not morally. In other words, he was, antithetical to my values. I don't think he was a bad man. I just mean he was worth shit to me because I don't want war with the Soviet Union, and I would like for black people to not be segregated. Yes. I have radical ideas like that. By the way, the other great thing about Buckley, even though he had terrible values from my point of view, was he had this amazing show called Firing Line on TBS, which to this day, I keep telling people this, and my friend Camille Foster and I have the same fantasy. We want to bring Firing Line back because that was everybody, and you can watch it on YouTube, and it's unique. I mean, there have been some attempts to remake it, sort of with Crossfire on CNN for a while, which was kind of a very pale imitation of it, actually. But you really don't see anything like this. So what Buckley would do it was his show. And this also was crucial in my political development. And again, I've never mentioned this before. It's fine. I don't know what you're bringing it out of me, Buck.
I love it.
Must be your lineage. You're
yeah, Buckleyite.
So, yeah, I think everyone should watch Firing Line, at least one episode. First of all, it's just if you are at all interested in these things, it's awesome entertainment because what Buckley did was he just brought the top level, the smartest people on the left to come debate him. Or he'd have a goddamn WWF gang brawl between there'd be Noam Chomsky and Gore Vidal on one side and Buckley and some, I don't know, Barry Goldwater on the other side, and they would just be going at it, but it was going at it at this really high level. And I was just thinking about Buckley's tacit support of segregation, more than tacit support of segregation when he debated James Baldwin, which was an amazing moment in world history. Buckley essentially arguing for segregation against James Baldwin, the great writer, novelist, essayist. But even though Buckley had, values that were opposite mine, I was like, this dude is what a political intellectual should be. He is, I think to this day, maybe he might be, in terms of what he did, maybe the most principled intellectual in American history. I think that might even be true. I aspire to build that kind of thing, right? With Renegade University, I want the best minds having it out, and that's what I imagined college would be when I was a freshman. But it wasn't. It was socialists arguing with liberals at best. At best. Yeah. So in college, though, I was influenced in terms of my commitment to intellectualism and maybe my methodology and maybe my writing style and my ability to craft essays, my essay writing style. I still was firmly committed to socialism. I founded the local chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America. That's Bernie Sanders' organization, which AOC is also a part of. The membership of that was 1.
That's hard to believe in Berkeley that the membership was 1.
I'm sorry, this was in college. I was in Ohio.
Oh, gotcha.
But it was a very special part of Ohio. It's Antioch College, which is the most left-wing college ever in history. So it's in Yellow Springs, Ohio, which is a really pretty little village. And I actually recommend it if you're ever in Southwest Ohio to go by Yellow Springs. It's where Dave Chappelle actually lives. And I went to school with his sister, and his father was a professor there when I was there. Yeah, the Chappelles were a big part of that school. But but Antioch was so far left that I was a socialist and I was considered a conservative.
Wow.
It was dominated by people, I'm not kidding, who went on to found essentially the Portland and Seattle Antifa.
Wow.
They were among the founding generation of the original Portland and Seattle anarchists. This was we graduated in 88 and 89, and my best friends, we were the political people on campus. That's what they did. They moved to the Northwest, and they got into that kind of black bloc. And they didn't call it Antifa then. It was black bloc anarchism was what they called it. And it was anarcho-communism. But these were people who'd go and throw bricks at stuff and tear down stuff. And my favorite this was great. There was once a Bush Senior was president, and he came to town. and I wish Antifa would do this. This would be a huge improvement. They took all of them wearing all black and all black hoodies. They also invented that style, by the way, my friends, that little generation right then. They, instead of throwing bricks at Bush, they all took Epicac, which makes you throw up.
Yeah.
And beforehand, they had drunk a quart of water, and there were 3 of them, and one drank red food coloring, and one drank blue food coloring, and the other drank white food coloring. And so they threw up the red, white, and blue on the street where Bush's motorcade drove over, and that was their idea of radical protest. But anyway, so that's who I was hanging out with. Then again, they were really into reading serious political theory, unlike the current Antifa, as far as I can tell. My friends were actually intellectuals. I mean, in that way. I mean, so we read heavy duty stuff. That's when I read Nietzsche. That's when I read Marx. That's when I read all the kind of cutting edge theory at the time on the left. Didn't get into postmodernism at all. I didn't know anything about that, but Chomsky, Howard Zinn, got all that good reading in, the good left wing indoctrination, but smart stuff in, and I learned how to think in a lot of ways. And then I went to graduate school a couple of years after that. I hung out in Berkeley I came back to Berkeley after college. I worked this circles back. I had a gigantic digression. I'm going to get back to it right now. I graduated in 1983, 84, and that was when, I graduated in 89, and that was when the civil wars in the Central America were dominating the foreign policy sort of pages at the time. The war between the Marxist rebels in El Salvador and the Sandinistas and the government there in Nicaragua. And I became involved in that. I was hired as staff for it's so left-wing sounding, it's unbelievable. It was the Labor Solidarity, the Labor Network on Central America. So it was like organizing Marxist labor leaders to work in solidarity with, meaning raise money for basically these Marxist guerrilla fighters in the jungles of Nicaragua and El Salvador.
Wow.
That's about as left wing as it gets, right? It's man, Lenin would have loved me. We were doing exactly the job he was calling for. So yeah, that's what I did. And then in 91, Big Bush did the first Gulf War, right? And he invaded where he occupied Kuwait, and then invaded and kicked out Saddam and killed however many people and whatever. But one of the forgotten war. Scott Horton's great about this. He's always like that. There's Iraq 1.
Yep.
There's Iraq 2, and now we're in Iraq 3. And by the way, I think Scott's even this. I was about to tell him this. I think he's underestimating. I think the war on ISIS is number 4, but that's a story, by the way, I think we're going to tell. We're working on a video project right now, by the way, to tell through video the history of the war on ISIS, which has not been done at all.
Excellent.
We're hoping to send Danny Sherson, who's a great antiwar.com contributor and a veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan, back. And he's going to trace the route and go to all the cities that ISIS occupied in Iraq and Syria, and then and tell the story from the ground. And say, if we get the money, we're going to start crowdfunding it really soon. If we get that money, it's going to be a world-changing media event. Yeah, it's amazing. But anyway, so I was, and it's funny. It's all again full circle. Like I'm still interested in foreign policy, right? As you know, like it's the thing that I care most about. Politics after intellectualism. Intellectualism is number 1 always, but war is number 2 always. I mean, that's always in terms of policy. That's the top thing. If you're not good on war, I'm not going to be good with you, probably. Yeah. And because that's where I started, right? I started my politics there, and I don't know why. I mean, there's something about that. I had dreams when I was in high school of being in World War I after having read descriptions of the Battle of the Somme, which is one of the most horrific things that's ever happened in human history, and it just stuck with me. I don't know why. I mean, I'm not like I guess I'm sort of sensitive, but like I don't know why that in particular is what stayed with me. As something that I hated and feared so much that I would commit much of my life to opposing. Yeah. So I was, as of 1991. So Big Bush goes to war, and I and about 100,000 other people occupied downtown San Francisco, sat down in the streets at midnight when Bush said if Saddam didn't withdraw from Kuwait, he would go to war. He said he gave him the time. There was a deadline. It was midnight that night. It was in January. Oh, man, I still remember that. I remember like my chest tightening thinking about this, that at midnight people are going to be killed. Mm-hmm. If we don't start, right? Yeah, so I hadn't thought about that in a long time. So we did, and then I was an idiot, 20, whatever I was year old, and thought it was a really good idea to, at that point, express my rage by running onto the Bay Bridge to block it. So about, I don't know, a dozen of us, of the most radical of those thousands of people in the streets, found a pathway next to the Bay Bridge. There is, if anyone's listening who knows the Bay Area, knows San Francisco, I can show you there's a little hill right on the one part of the Bay Bridge where you can actually walk onto it, where the cars are going 65 miles an hour. Mm-hmm. The stupidest fucking thing ever. I jump over the barrier, and thank God, actually, I have to say this, like right at that moment, the highway patrol, motorcycle cops just like swarmed me and grabbed me, and they're spinning around. They're grabbing the back of my shirt, and they don't have, that's all, one of them has the back of my shirt. I'm trying to get away, and it turns into like this like whirlwheel where I'm like going around in circles as he's holding on to me, and I hold out my hands, and my comrades who are off the side of the bridge reach out, grab me by the hands, and pull me out of the cops' hands over the side and save me from being arrested for blocking traffic. And probably worse than that, I would have done jail time. Man, never even thought about that either. Not to mention maybe getting killed, getting hit by a car. Right. So these days, by the way, they're blocking the Bay Bridge on a regular basis. It's happened like half a dozen times in the last like month at least. And each time all I think is, fuck you people, because also it's like my little dumb juvenile narcissistic 20-something ass didn't occur to me that like, oh, people had lives and emergencies and important things to get to on the other side of the bridge, you little prick. Right. That's how I think of myself in that moment. I wish, there are moments in my life when I wish someone had kicked my ass, seriously. I mean that because it would have like redirected me sooner. It took me too long to figure it out on my own, these things. But anyway, I thank God I didn't do any damage to anybody, and I got away with it. So just out of luck. Then anyway, I decided to go do what you have to do when you're on the left in this country, which is go to graduate school. That's the only thing to do. You're a committed leftist, right? That's the only place to be, because that's where the castle is. That's the cathedral. That's cathedral that they control. It's the only safe space, really. It's the only place to speak in that language and get away with it and even get paid for it, if you're lucky enough. So I applied to all the top graduate schools. By that point, I'd become committed to history because I realized that philosophy was great for asking questions, but for winning arguments, you had to know history. And I found that the more history I knew, the easier it was to win arguments, and almost in unfair ways. But to this day, it's very difficult to argue with me because I know so much fucking history that, I can pull out 57 facts that are going to work against your argument no matter what it is, right? It's just a pain in the ass to argue with a historian. I don't know if any of you have experienced that, but yeah, it's a powerful weapon. I strongly recommend it. Is really my point here. So, and I'm really glad that I chose it actually because it's true. I still believe that just as much as I did when I was 25. So I applied everywhere. Antioch College did not give out grades because it was such a hippie, anarchist, nonsense school. It was also a fourth-rate academic institution, and no one admitted me except for Columbia University. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. What luck. But they wouldn't give me any money. And I had to pay, I forget what it was, but many, many, many thousands of dollars to attend. And there was one chance to get money if I proved myself after the first year. If I gave them this money, they had this program where they admitted a bunch of people with no funding who they didn't have much faith in. And they hoped that, one of them would, or at least maybe one of them would rise to the occasion. And they had a fellowship, a multi-year fellowship for that person if they proved themselves. So I moved to New York with my girlfriend and I gave them the money. I took a big loan out, which I ended up defaulting on, by the way, and got in and was treated like fine, but I was nobody. Everybody in my cohort went to Harvard and Yale and UC Berkeley and Stanford and Oberlin and, Amherst. And I came from this like college that no one had heard of. And anyway, but I was that guy. So I won that fellowship that year. And that was the pivot. That was the big turning point in my life. Now, it didn't change my politics right away. I did the other thing that you're supposed to do when you're a Marxist, which is be a labor historian, not just a historian, but you got to be a labor historian. That's like the OG Marxist. You're like the real shit Marxist if you do labor history. Do you know what unions actually mean? Like most people don't, even a lot of socialists don't even understand what it actually means, what collective bargaining actually is. But so I did that. So I said, okay, I was going to do labor. So I'm going to do labor history. And I started studying labor history. And I was like, here's this communist union that did all these great things, quote unquote, for the workers. And they were communists and they were also in the civil rights movement. And cool. All right. What's the next book? Oh, it's another union that was like socialist. And they were really the same thing. Wow. It's like another left-wing union. And I went into the stacks in the library and I saw that there were like shelves and shelves and shelves of like books about left-wing unions in American history. And I was like, wait a minute, I live in the United States. I'm looking around. There is no socialism at all. Like, by the way, people living now don't understand maybe that back in the 90s, there was no socialism hardly. There was no Bernie. I mean, Bernie Sanders was in Congress, but no one gave a shit about him. He was nothing. And socialism was absolutely taboo in the mainstream media. Like, it's a completely different landscape now. Socialism was just a non-starter in the mainstream. That was like it was like playing Dungeons and Dragons. It was that obscure and weird to be a socialist in the 90s. So I was like, this can't be. Like, how could all these unions have been socialists? These are like working class Americans, right? You ever hung out with like truck drivers and like factory workers? You think they're all socialists and communists? This can't be. No, of course not. It's all fucking bullshit propaganda, it turns out. I mean, mostly. A bunch of commie labor historians just cherry-picked, their favorite unions and wrote these, glorifying books about them, basically. And they ignored, guess what? The largest union in world history, the Teamsters Union, which had 2.5 million members at one point. There was not a single book written about it. I was like, what's this about? What? That's weird. That's the biggest union and there's nothing written about it? Why? Oh, well, I found out they had the wrong politics. They weren't socialists. All they wanted was more money and better working conditions, period. And they did whatever they could to get that by any means necessary. And their leader, their great leader, their famous, very popular leader was Jimmy Hoffa, which many people now know his name again because of The Irishman. but he was the most famous labor leader of the 20th century. He was by far the most popular labor leader of the 20th century, I mean, among his own members. And that's because he got the goods for them. He got the money, and he got the better working conditions. And he didn't give a shit about ideology and socialism and controlling the factories and managing industries and regulating and taking control of government and the dictatorship of the proletariat, blah, 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 blah. So they hated his guts and they ignored him. And I thought that's odd. You say you're labor historians and you say that you stand in solidarity with the working class. And I'm talking about a union of truck drivers of 2 million plus. And you're just going to ignore the whole thing because their boss, the boss of the union, had the wrong political views. My goodness, you guys are politically and intellectually bankrupt. And here's the big turn, Buck, the next big turn, which you'll really appreciate. I started to say, so why was Hoffa so good at his job? Like, why did he get such great contracts for these truck drivers? Why was he so militant and aggressive constantly in bargaining with employers? And he got these great contracts. He improved the lives of these working class guys by being like a tough ass bargainer and threatening strikes and going on strikes and beating up scabs. Not necessarily things I endorse, but he got the fucking job done and he really did the work. He was good, and that's why his members loved him for the most part. Well, guess why? Guess why he was accountable to his what causes people or institutions, really? What causes institutions to be accountable to constituents, right? Might it be competition? Because generally it's either like some weird Christian altruism that will make you do things like that, or it's the fear of losing your position, right? Turns out with Hoffa, it was very much the latter. He was surrounded by all these competing unions. In fact, a lot of them were these commie unions in the CIO and stuff who were trying to poach truck drivers to get their dues, trying to poach the warehouse workers that Hoffa had organized to get their dues. So Hoffa was fending off all these other unions, and the only way to do that was either to kick them at their asses in the street. So there's a lot of violence during this period, and I'm talking about like blowing up cars and shooting people and tons of fist fights with chains and bats and stuff. So there's a lot of good old stuff like that in the 1930s going on, 1940s and 50s that Hoffa was leading. I interviewed a lot of guys with like one eye or one leg for this project. I told the story of Jimmy Hoffa and the Teamsters. And I told the story that it turns out that competition among unions is really good for the working class. And the socialist, commie, Marxist, labor historians, and everybody else in my profession said that can't be right. I said, what do you mean it can't be right? Well, it can't be right because one big union, one big socialist union is what we need. We don't want the working class fighting among itself. We need the working class to be organized and unified as one government, one ruling class. That's Marxism, dumbass. I said, oh, right. That's right. That's why I'm no longer a Marxist. And that's why I'm starting to think that this thing like competition might be a good thing, which is basically a market. It's basically a market. Union members at the working class people. There were so many unions during that time. Again, this was a totally different landscape. 1/3 of all workers in this country were in unions during that time. There was a big market, because they paid dues. They pay dues. Once you're in a union, you pay every month. You pay a certain amount of money to the union, right? So that's what unions are after. They're after that dues money. That's their revenue. That's their profit. And so the workers had a lot of advantage. That's a lot of leverage, right? If you have all these unions after you, man, you have a pure choice of 3 or 4 unions. Man, you can get a good deal. You can actually get a union that'll actually do good things for you. Unlike the unions now that all enjoy a monopoly because of the 1955 AFL-CIO merger. It's a longer story. But anyway, ever since then, there's been a merger. This is why labor is dead, and that's actually probably a good thing. They decided to form one big monopoly and outlaw inter-union rivalry and competition. So there is basically unions never fight each other anymore, and therefore they have no reason to serve their workers, to serve their members. And so they fuck their members for the most part, suck their dues and gives them almost nothing in return. There you go. That's my history of the rise and fall of my socialist commitment and the beginning of my interest in libertarian ideas, cultural libertarianism, and other things. But I've been talking a long time. Why don't you ask a question? I'm sorry, but it's a big old history I haven't told many people right there.
Yeah, I know. That's what's so cool about it. Is there's I've listened to you quite a bit, and I was like, I haven't heard him say these things before, so I feel like I'm getting some exclusive information.
I was, yeah.
I kind of got to ask you a little bit about this when we did one of the RU Live. It was the one with Bob Murphy.
Yeah.
You don't call yourself a libertarian. In fact, I've heard you say you're not one, correct?
Yeah. I mean, when I said I got interested in libertarian ideas, I did. I was like, I realized later, I didn't even know at the time that they were libertarian ideas, just about markets being, generally preferable to like, state intervention and monopolies, right? That's all. Is kind of that primitive, and that, competition among producers tends to be really good for consumers, whether they're actually, potential union members or people shopping at Walmart, right? But then, sorry, I kind of blanked on your question. Bob Murphy.
Yeah, I just basically, I get curious when I hear someone that's such a thinker like yourself, and then I hear and I think, well, he sounds kind of like a libertarian. And then you'll say, but I'm not one. Malice does the same thing, and it's always intrigues me. What is there anything in the philosophy of libertarianism where you go, that's definitely not me right there?
Okay, cool. So Malice calls himself an anarchist, though.
Yes, sir.
So he doesn't identify. So I don't identify as anything. Now, that's for a bunch of reasons, and they're both principled and strategic. So the principled reasons are enough for me not to identify. I simply, my worldview is simply my own. It's unique. Whether it's good or bad, dumb or smart, whether you like it or not, it's unique. I've never, to this day, I have not encountered anybody who holds it. I've never met anybody who has all the parts in the same place that I do. My best friends basically are the closest people, and even we disagree pretty significantly on a bunch of stuff, or we just have like different priorities in certain areas, right? I mean, they care about some things more than I do, or whatever. But I've really never met anybody who I would call a Thaddeist.
I like it.
Right? I mean, and what I've just been trying to do is trying to not influence or indoctrinate, but simply make an offer, right? That's what I think intellectuals should do, is just make an offer. Here's an offer, everyone. It's like on the market, right? Offering your house for sale. Here's an idea. It's free. Here's an idea. Take it or leave it. If you like it, cool. Let's do something together. Let's build something together. Let's build a university together. Let's do a podcast together. Let's make a video about Iraq together. Let's stop the next war together, right? And if you don't like it, great. Just be clear about who you are, so I know who the enemy is, please. So that I know who will be shooting at me from across the barricades at some point. And that's what I look for in people. At the end of the day, I really don't care too much about which politics you choose. Like, that's not gonna, I will still respect you, and I can totally love you regardless of your politics. And I mean, even if you're a fascist, maybe, probably, yeah. If you're like really honest about it and have integrity and really and know who you are and understand and take it seriously, right? Most people who are fascists these days do it as a lark, right? If they're not really serious. And fascism is actually a very developed, important, sophisticated ideology. It's the opposite of what I believe, but it's like a serious thing. So if you know you're a fascist and you're clear about it, like, I don't have a beef. What's the beef? Like, that's your choice. I can't tell you you're wrong. You're a sovereign individual. I can't tell you your choices are wrong. So I think the NAP is silly. I think it also, if it's applied, I think it would tend to serve very conservative in bad ways, in non-libertarian ways, purposes. And I don't know if you've heard me give my example of the Mexican-American kid in Mesa, Arizona, working at a Walmart. Have you heard me do this?
No, please do.
I did this on the School Sucks podcast like many, many years ago. But so Walmart, right? Let's Arizona, someplace in there, not Mesa because it's all built up now, but some smallish town, the smallest town in Arizona where there's a Walmart. Okay, so it's a big fucking desert with nothing in it, basically, right? Except a Walmart. And that means that a bunch of stuff had to be built before there could be a Walmart there, namely roads and electrical grids and sewage and plumbing and all that, right? By the government. So Walmart gets subsidized before it's even there, right? And of course, the city and state and federal government have put money into the highway, the freeway too, that serves the purposes of Walmart. Also, with the express purpose, they're not shy about this, the express purpose of serving business, serving business. That's why they build those roads. It's one of the main reasons. It's the primary reason, they said. And so Sam Walton comes along and says, thank you very much. I'll take this gigantic subsidy that smaller business entities don't get. Nobody ever built a road for Renegade University, I'll tell you that much. The government ain't done shit for me and never will. So, in fact, all they will do is attempt to throttle us, right? Mm-hmm. If they do anything. But, all right. So to me, and to, I would think, the most hardcore Misesian libertarian Austrian economist, that's basically an act of aggression by the state. They're stealing money to favor one capitalist actor. My God, what a violation of the NAP. But they don't talk about that, do they? Except for Kevin Carson. Kevin Carson's the only libertarian I know of who talks about this, by the way. So they built the Walmart, and, you know, it's like a town full of Mexicans. And for the Mexicans, it's, you know, there's a little bit of, you can either pick something in a hot field all day, you can garden a rich person's house, or you can clean the house, or you can work at Walmart, right? There are towns like this. We all know this. Choices are extremely limited, and guess what? Who limited those choices? The government, by favoring one humongous multinational corporation over everybody else, granting it a virtual monopoly on retail in that area. By the way, everybody also shops at Walmart in your town, of course. Why? Government help. Government help. This is corporatism. This is not capitalism. This is an act of aggression across the board before they've even hired anybody. Okay, so you are 18-year-old Jose Luis Gonzalez, son of immigrants. You hated your public schooling. Oh, shit. You were forced. My gosh, we forgot about this, didn't we? 13 years in prison, known as school. Public schools. He was forced into those every goddamn day of his life from the age of 5 to 18, doing untold damage to his brain, right? And certainly denying him of the freedom with which he could have built something, developed something, learned something, grown something, made money, built his own power. Could have had a house probably by the time he was 18 if the schools hadn't imprisoned him and enslaved him for those 13 years. You ever hung out with Mexicans? They work fucking hard. Why? Because they're immigrants. Think about that. We imprison immigrant children. How productive do you think those kids would be, and how much would they learn, by the way? Learn. Holy fucking Christ. Okay, so we have this prisoner being released when he's 18 years old into the world. Make your way. Survive now, buddy. Oh, the only job in town, by the way, is either going back to the fields where your grandparents worked after crawling through a tunnel, or you can work in the government-created ginormous box across the street there. All right, so he works at Walmart for minimum wage. And turns out that, like, you know, half his family is illegal immigrants, et cetera, so they can't make a wage to support themselves. And so people are actually on the verge of starvation. And your wage is not going to cover that. Remember, you know, what made those people illegal and starving? The government. So you work in there at Walmart and the job's fine. You getting your whatever it is an hour, 5, 10, whatever year you're working, you know, whatever the minimum wage is. But people are like on the verge, are hungry, like literally. You know, we're not talking about Americans here. I mean, no American is hungry, by the way. It's a myth. Immigrants who just crossed the border or illegal, fuck yeah, they're that close, right? Because of the government. So you steal stuff from Walmart because they have a lot of food, a lot of everything. You steal food for your family. Well, the libertarians are going to say that you violated the contract you signed with Walmart. Contract was that you would exchange your labor for your wage. So why on earth should anyone countenance this violation of contract, this violation of the property rights of Walmart, this moral infraction, this violation of the sacred non-aggression principle? This was an act of aggression, you Mexican kid. So, Buck, I submit it to you and your audience. What do you think's missing there in their analysis?
Well, what I'm hearing is within the current confines of government and the system and the corporate setup that we are all living under, the nap being followed 100% of the time from our end of it is not the easiest thing to do. Because it's violated the moment
right.
So
right.
So it's almost like the two wrongs don't make a right kind of deal is what I'm sensing.
It's just like it doesn't exist. But my point is, right, it's impossible to live in that. It's always being violated. So there is hardly a capitalist entity that has not benefited from the state, right? Even I, to some extent, sure, right? Sure. The pipes for the internet,
right?
I guess, or somewhat, whatever, something was done for me, I guess. So, aggression has been done in our favor. And what I'm saying is it ends up trapping, essentially, people, right? Because it's the creation of monopoly. Libertarians are the ones who taught us that government regulation creates monopoly.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
Or at least a concentration of capital, which is a reduction in choice for workers. You're reducing the choice for workers, right, of employment. This is another thing that libertarians fuck up on horribly. They always pretend as if there's just this infinite choice of labor, of jobs for everyone at any time. Sure. What was my guy's name? Jose Luis Gonzalez?
Uh-huh.
Sure. Yeah, I guess theoretically he could have moved to some other part of the country and found, that had more jobs in it. Totally. But okay. But you know what? I happen to have been born in Berkeley, California, where there were jobs galore in every single industry you could imagine. I mean, come on, people. And there were, it's so it's I just find it quite frustrating.
Let me tell you guys about another sponsor for today's show, and that is Lucky Guy Bakery over at luckyguybakery.com. The brownies are insanely delicious, and they make excellent gifts. They do little gift boxes over there. The logo is awesome. The packaging is really well done, and each one has a handwritten gift note, a very personalized touch. And obviously with the lockdown and COVID mess that's been going on, you're missing a lot of birthday parties and graduation parties. This is a really cool way to send gifts to someone, let them know you're thinking about them. It's from luckyguybakery.com. They've got an amazing selection of brownies over there, starting at only $22, and that's before you get the discount from being a fan of this show. You get 20% off just by putting in DTTP at checkout. They're award-winning brownies. They've been featured on the Today Show. They're one of the top 5 bakeries in Indiana, Lucky Guy Bakery is, according to Yelp. They got best mail order brownies as well. Obviously, in 2020, some of your family members and friends want the gluten-free ones and vegan options. Well, they've got all of that. So go to luckyguybakery.com, enter code DTTP at checkout. You will get 20% off. Guys, let's support these small businesses that support libertarian podcasts like this one. Once again, luckyguybakery.com, promo code DTTP at checkout. You won't be sorry. To kind of switch gears, maybe a touch, but we've laid some awesome groundwork here. Do you think that I've actually not heard you discuss this in these terms specifically, so I can't wait to hear your opinion. Do you think we're in the midst of a cultural war right now in this country?
Sure. I mean, well, we kind of always are.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's always cultural wars going on. But I guess that's not what is at all. That's not what's notable about what's going on now. Or I would say that's not what's unique at all. It's just the pitch at which it's being fought is higher than I've ever seen in my life. So I'm 54 years old. And as everyone now well knows, I've been a political animal since I was born. And I have never, ever seen anything like this. It is, I don't know, it's really disorienting. It's just because it is such a unique thing, and I'm processing it on the fly here like everyone else. There are sort of mass psychic movements going on, meaning that there are, obviously a sort of masses of people thinking in ways that we haven't really seen before. And there are multiple psychic movements, mass psychic movements like that, right? So, as I said before, like in the 1990s, like socialism was a dead letter. Like no one said that word. It was like a huge deal. I remember this really, really clearly. When I was a socialist, all my buddies and I, it was like we were so stoked when we would see the word socialism mentioned, like in the mainstream media, just the word. We were like, oh my God, he said socialism. And now, you have half the Democratic Party is essentially, avowedly socialist, and very well might split from the Democratic Party, which would be a good thing. So, there's that. I mean, there's just within the Democrats, you have like this new culture war, and that's a culture war, right? Because that wing of the Democratic Party, they're not only socialists, they're also identity. That's the interesting thing. There's going to be another split. Watch out. I just thought of this. But the left of the Democratic Party, right, is, AOC and Bernie love each other right now. But Bernie is an old school Marxist type who believed in class as everything. And that if you solved the class struggle, that racism and sexism would go away. And AOC is of the school that, oh yeah, let's have socialism, but racism and sexism are eternal, right? And not only are they eternal, but they're also just as important as capitalism, right? So that's a problem. Bernie was dragged into identity politics and supporting BLM. He really was. I mean, they actually stormed his stage twice when he ran in the last election. People may remember this. These black women got on stage and grabbed his microphone and started shouting him down. He hadn't mentioned Black Lives Matter, which was true. He hadn't. And this was right after Ferguson, right? And the next day, Bernie Sanders became BLM. But that's not the dude's heart, He's way too old to be changing his politics at this point, So I am sure, and I know that a lot of Bernie people feel, and then if you look at Bernie bros, if you look at the Bernie supporters, that's totally how they think. So if you listen to Chapo Trap House, which is the big podcast, which is all Bernie bros, they're a great barometer of that, by the way. That's totally what they're about. They're like, yeah, man, it's all about socialism. And once we get socialism, we're cool. Michael Brooks, my friend who just died recently, who was on the Majority Report with Sam Cedar and the Michael Brooks show, like that was his argument as well. Even though he was as anti-racist as anybody you'll ever meet, and like pro-black too, basically. But Michael, and Chapo, the Chapo guys, and Jacobin, by the way, and Adolph Reed, a whole bunch of intellectuals, are still class reductionist in that way, which I respect as an argument, definitely. And I'm more sympathetic to it for sure. But they're going to split. I mean, there's going to be a split even there. So I'm just describing already some warfare that's just on the left, right? That's culture wars, right? The culture wars, because Bernie was an old white man, and the black women on stage were very aware of that. They made it very apparent. And so AOC's, can't stop telling you she's Puerto Rican, blah, blah, blah. And Amir and Ilhan, what's her face, and Omar in Minnesota, right? It's all about race and a race and a race and a race. Somali, right? They're identitarians primarily. They are identitarians, and the Bernie bros are class reductionist Marxists, and those two don't get along. So that's going to be a fight, a culture war. It is a fight already. It's already a culture war. All right, so there's that. Holy Christ. And then you've got the psychotic stuff. And by that, I mean, it's, the BLM, whatever happened, whatever it was that happened after George Floyd's murder, whatever that was, it's nothing I've ever seen before, in that it very quickly became about every left-wing movement, except, by the way, this is very important and notable, except which one? The anti-war movement.
Right.
Has anyone seen an anti-war sign at any of these fucking marches? No, but we've seen a sign for every other left-wing cause, haven't we?
Yeah.
Everyone.
Interesting how the anti-war doesn't intersect with any of their other causes of intersectionality issues.
Exactly right. Yeah. Where did the interest of the victims of American imperialism go in their intersectional puzzle? How come they're not in it? God, it's enraging when I think about it. Yeah, because, it's like even climate change is brought into it, because climate change is racist. The effects of climate change are racist, right? That's one of the things that was right there. We've been talking about that. Because George Floyd got killed by a cop. for forging a check rather than talking about why we have cops dealing with people forging checks and putting their knees on their necks. That's all.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of that simple. But no, it had to be every left-wing movement except for anti-war movement. And I don't even know what the fuck that's about. I honestly don't, except that it's craven and disgusting and I can't stand it. And it's one of the many, many reasons I despise the left with all my soul. But it is interesting, right? How the hell did they forget that? How the hell did they forget that we're still in Afghanistan killing people? How the hell did they forget that we're bombing Yemenis, basically? Like, the poorest black people on earth, we are fucking bombing them, killing them every day, and they don't even care. But they care about trans people, and there's about 29 of them. And I have no problem with trans people, but that doesn't make any sense. Like, if you're worried about trans people, you got to be worried about dead Yemeni children, don't you?
They're more worried about the trans people being able to bomb the Yemeni children at this point.
I just invented my next tweet. I just thought of it. It's going to be something like, we need to announce that all Yemenis are trans.
Yes. Then all of a sudden, yeah, they might care.
They will care. And yeah, or just maybe remind them that they're kind of black too. You know? They're being killed they're black people being killed by the United States, guys. It's just not so many in this country. There you go. Somalia, right? Same thing's going on, but they don't give a fuck. Black people, the poorest black people, they don't care. Isn't that incredible? I don't understand that. What kind of narcissism is that? So yeah, that's psychotic shit, right? There were nine unarmed black people killed by the police last year in the United States. Okay. I am anti-cop to the bone. But I looked at every single one of those cases. I read up on them. It looks pretty clear that at least half of them were a guy basically charging at a cop with a gun, so according to the rules of the game, which I don't like, but according to the rules, they had to shoot the guy. So, I mean, we're talking about literally a handful of men who were shot to death by cops last year. And that caused everything, and Yemen and Afghanistan and Somalia and Iraq caused nothing. Mm-hmm. That's psychotic. Climate change is racist. That's psychotic, guys. Sorry, it just is. I understand the argument, but it's still psychotic that you think it actually is significant. Like, I get that, like, poor people live in places that are more polluted, and poor people in this country, at least, tend to be black. But that's not the same thing. It's just psychotic to make that jump. Anyway, it just and then let's go to the super psychotic. The super psychotic is the very common belief. It's amazing that I'm even saying this. It's hard to imagine this is coming. I can't believe I'm saying that it's coming out of my mouth, but it's the large swaths of this population, including lots of people I know and love, family members, who are highly educated, highly intelligent, have been political their entire lives, who believe that there is a Nazi threat in this country. Mm-hmm. Don't know what to do with that, except say they need to go on medication. So they believe that, as a sign says in my very neighborhood, racism is the other pandemic. They believe there's a racist pandemic. They believe that black people are being murdered in the streets on a regular basis. Have you ever seen a lynching? So there hasn't been a lynching in the United States, according to the NAACP, not me, according to the NAACP, since the 1950s, guys. Okay. So we had lots of lynchings in the 1890s and 1900s, for sure. But it declined, and I can show you the numbers. NAACP kept the numbers. You can just go to their website. This is a very good thing, by the way. NAACP lynching, it's got a whole website devoted to this. Go there, you can see the numbers. They peak in the 1890s and declines gradually but steadily ever after, and they basically stop in the 1950s. There hasn't been a lynching since. Have you ever heard of somebody being hung by a tree?
Nope.
Thank you. All right. Because I do think that would make the news. It's just a guess. So we can get into sort of like why it is we need to manufacture racism in this country. And that's a whole discussion. But it's obviously psychotic. That's actually something, unfortunately, that a neocon said. But he was right. Irving Kristol said that America's race relations are psychotic. And he said that in the 1980s, I think, and it's more true now than ever. And I don't know why either, because there is absolute legal equality right now, and has been since I was born in 1965. Absolute legal equality. There's no debating that. Legal equality, absolute, for women and black people, absolute, since the year I was born. That's a long time. It's 54 years. Anyway, so there are all kinds of reasons I believe that black people are still poor compared to white people. And all of them pretty much have to do with the government, by the way. For instance, something no one ever talks about, like if you look at all the major interstate freeways in the country and look at the big cities that they travel through, you will notice that they cut off the black neighborhood from the rest of the big city.
That has actually been brought up multiple times here in Austin, that it actually does do that here. And that's the local chapter of BLM. That's a big talking point for them. Good for them. Yeah. I mean, not all of them are stupid. Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, it's disgusting. Oakland, where I live, is bisected very cleanly by the 580. West of it is black and Latino, and east of it is hills and white people. So, that's just the beginning. Well, the war on drugs. So, as I said to somebody recently, somewhere, I forget what it was, if you just legalize drugs, and I mean all drugs right now, powders, according to FBI estimates, we reduce the prison population. Hold on to your hats, everyone. This is according to the FBI. If we legalize drugs, meaning this is the number of people in prison on drug-related charges, like stealing to pay for a coke habit, okay? We reduce the prison population by 50%. That's the FBI's own estimate. 50% of people in prison are in there for drug-related crime. And as we well know, something like 40 to 50% of those are African-American men. A whole fucking generation just snatched off the streets because of that fucking abomination. So there's a couple of ideas. And then the minimum wage. Sorry, but Thomas Sowell was right. I mean, it's obvious. It works against black people, black youth in particular, obviously, and that needs to be abolished. And, get the cops out of their lives. I am all for abolishing the police, in the hoods in particular. Beverly Hills can have cops. That's fine. I don't care. But yeah, let's take them up on their word, BLM. And I mean this seriously. I think it's a really good idea. I just don't think they're prepared for it. And I don't think they're ready for what it means. That's my problem with it. I want them to be ready. Here's the deal. I've said this for years. Yeah, let's totally not defund the police. Let's fucking abolish the police. Let's give Black Lives Matter exactly what they're asking for. And I mean this seriously. This is totally sincere, right? I don't want black people dealing with police ever again. They've dealt with them enough in their lives. But what that means is they have to police themselves, of course. They have to not police themselves. They have to provide security for themselves as individuals and as neighborhoods if they so choose. That's so totally fine. I have zero problem with communal security. That's fine. But that's a big project. That's a big project if you're living in Compton or if you're living in Southside Chicago right now, right? Although if you eliminate the drug war, you're going to take most of the guns off the streets right away. Or at least you're going to take most of the shooters off the streets, or at least the shooters won't have any power. And pretty soon they won't even have the money to pay for their bullets, literally, right? Because they don't have a business anymore. And they're going to have to make real jobs and be entrepreneurs. Holy fuck, black people forced to be entrepreneurs, right? And that's what, when I had Hotep Jesus on, black nationalism, that's what that's all about. That's why I support black nationalism in this country and always have, because that's what it's about. It's about fuck the white man and fuck this shit. Make our own thing, make our own business, make our own power, and then we can talk about race and what's been done to us. But once we have, it's like being in a relationship, right? It's unequal in power, right? It's just hard to talk. It's hard to be yourself, and it's hard to negotiate, and it's hard to even know who you are unless you have the same economic power as your partner. Well, that's what he's saying. Let's talk about race once we have power. Until then, he says, and this is his great catchphrase: "Shut up and code." Get that bag, and then we can talk about race, right? And racism and what it might have done to us, or but it's not stopping us from getting that bag. So, those are some ideas. Do you think within modern progressivism, there's an inherent lust for violence?
Oh, wow. Awesome question.
Thank you.
Good one. Uh-huh. I'm going to take another hit of weed for that one.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you a story. Actually, with this person, it's more than one story. So recently, she said she's a lifelong lefty. She said it was just a casual conversation about politics. We weren't getting into it. We often argue, but we weren't getting into it. But Trump came up, and it wasn't even me. I think it was another person in the room talking to her about Trump, and she just said very casually, "Oh, if I had the chance to put a bullet in his head," and it's like, I don't care about Trump. I don't give a fuck, right? One way or the other, basically. But as a human being, I didn't want to put a bullet in Hillary Clinton's head. I really don't. I really, 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 really do not want to. Even the politicians I hate the most, I have never had the desire to kill them. Have I? No, I haven't. Although Gavin Newsom, I would beat up for sure at this point. I would definitely beat the crap out of that pretty boy for imprisoning me for 4 months. Yeah. But no, I don't fantasize about that. I also remember the same person, this woman, and by the way, she's 80 years old. This is an 80-year-old woman in Berkeley. Okay. Psychotherapist. This is a psychotherapist in Berkeley who's 80 years old, a woman, okay? Wants to shoot people in the head because of politics. I remember when she saw, this is way back in the day, Les Miserables, the musical. She saw that and she came out of it, or she told me about how she saw that. And when she came out of Les Miserables, she said, all I wanted to do was shoot Republicans.
Wow.
Yeah. So that woman, Buck, is my mother.
Interesting. What was your response when she said that, by the way, about wanting to put a bullet in his head?
Well, I was just going to say something about how that's maybe why I'm into boxing so much. It's the gene I got. I do have a violent streak for sure. I just thank God it hasn't been channeled into politics. What did I say? I don't know. I forget. I don't know if I really. I think I just made a quick sort of really, Mom? But I didn't get into it with her. But it's something else, isn't it?
Yeah, and I want to.
So okay, but yeah, I see a lot of bloodlust. Doug, tons of it. Oh yeah, sure. What? Eat the rich. Very common graffiti. Famous Dead Kennedy song, right? Or was it the song, or was it like a saying of theirs? Anyway, yeah, eat the rich. And Jello Biafra had lots of lyrics about killing and eating the rich. Yeah. And what else? Who else? I mean, I've heard lots, especially lately. There's socialists love to talk about expropriating the property of the rich. They love that.
Yes.
Doug Henwood, who was recently on my show, is a very well-known New York socialist. I remember teasing him a few years ago on Facebook because he had posted some real estate listing of a mansion and talking about how they were going to steal it, or he couldn't wait to expropriate it. And I was like, I said, it's just resentment, isn't it? He said, yeah, what's wrong with that? And I love him for that, right? Because I love honesty. My mother is a woman who is particularly prone to envy, and she'll admit it. She, I don't know why, she has no reason to, but she's extremely envious of anyone who is one notch above her in wealth.
Yep.
If she sees some, yeah, and anyone who's at all wealthier than she is, she just can't stand it. And I don't know why. I don't know where that comes from. And she's, believe me, perfectly comfortable. She's not rich, but she's perfectly comfortable and basically has been since I was a kid. They were poor when I was a kid, but they've been wealthy since I wasn't a kid, Thanks, parents. But anyway, they love talking about stealing the stuff from the rich, right, by force. And God, I'm just trying to think of examples, but there's just
I've got some because this is running through my head as you're saying this.
Got one. I got a really good one. Oh God, what was that amazing thing? That was it was like a month ago. There was a fucking I think it was United Nations poster that had it was about climate change. That's right. I'm pretty sure it was a United Nations poster about climate change in which it was two halves. So the left half was the world before environmentalists win. And so it was like factories and polluted streams and cows dying and a capitalist with a top hat, like lording over everybody. And in the other panel, I'm not kidding you, the rivers are clean. There is no factory. Children are playing in a forest. And I swear to fucking God, in the front is the capitalist in a cage.
Oh my goodness.
Shit you not, look it up. I tweeted it. It was like about a month ago. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure it was a United Nations poster. It was something like that. It was like WHO or UNO or one of those international governmental organizations. Yeah, it was unbelievable. So there's your bloodlust, but it's infinite, I think. I think that it's really what drives much of the left, sure, is envy and resentment. Absolutely. Of the wealthy, of the rich. They hate the rich. That's just their thing. That's their main driving impulse, is hatred of the rich. It really is.
Yeah, and you made a point a while ago, and you said richer than them, and because I mean,
nice authority, motherfuckers. You know what I mean? Like they can't tell me I'm wrong because like my mother, and my stepfather and my father and I and all of their comrades. Like I know all these people. I was among them until I was 30 years old. I was writing for left-wing magazines. Like I hung out with them. Like I was in the camp. I was in the cult. I was a part of the church. Like. This is absolutely true. I mean, I know it. Anyway, sorry, go ahead. I was cutting you off.
No, that's, I'm a musician here in Austin. And so a lot of my friends and acquaintances are musicians, basically, which, as you would imagine, are very left-leaning, and especially in this town. And you see some of them say things like, I can see for sure that this lockdown makes some of them smile. I mean, I know it does. They're talking about it on social media. And they like the fact that normal people that made a decent amount of money can't work right now. And the musicians who maybe made, let's calculate this really quick, a few $1,000s a month are getting that now from the government to sit home. In fact, I saw one of them say the government's job is to pay us to not work until this virus is gone.
Fuck, I didn't even think about that as one of the motivations for that stimulus package. Christ almighty. It's to, God damn it, right? Oh my God, right? They're paying people to stay in lockdown, right?
Yes.
They're paying them off to stay in lockdown, which of course helps Biden.
Yes, it does.
Oh my God. Because a destroyed economy destroys the incumbent every time. Every time. There's no incumbent who's ever won during an economic crisis. Ever. I mean, I'm sorry. It's not, and I don't think it's like, I mean, maybe they did, but I'm not saying this. I'm not saying that the Democrats sat at a table and made this decision explicitly. They didn't need to. They know it. They all know it. They all understand that, that they've managed to put the blame for most people on Trump for the pandemic, which is just silly. Not that I think he didn't. Not that I think he was great, but like, he was no worse than Andrew Cuomo, that's I'm sure, who did most of the damage in this whole country because when the New Yorkers all fled to the rest of the country and took the virus with them after he infected, all those fucking nursing homes. Jesus Christ, that guy should be in prison tomorrow. What the fuck is happening here? He forced 6,000 elderly people with coronavirus back into nursing homes. Does everyone know this? Like, God damn, he should be in prison.
Yeah, and there's people in the media celebrating him like he's been the best one in this whole mess.
I'm sorry. This is the most, and I used to live in New York. I lived in New York for 17 years, and I don't even live there, and I'm just like beside myself. I can't stand it that he's getting his ratings are higher than ever, apparently, like I've heard. And yeah, he's treated as like this kindly uncle or something. I'm like, he killed 6,000 old people. What are you talking about? At least, and maybe killed a lot more. He's primarily responsible for what happened in this country in terms of the pandemic spreading the way that it did. Where were we?
Well, I got a few more places to take us. Do you see a breakup coming at all?
Oh, we were talking about the violence in the left. Yeah, we're done with that. That's good. That was covered well enough, I think. The breakup, yeah. Well, so sure, I already talked about the Democrats, right?
I mean,
sorry, the United States.
Secession, yes, sir.
United States, yeah. Gosh, I hope so.
Me too.
Although, you know what? I should probably be a little more careful when I say that. I've been very cavalier in advocating secession without really taking into account like what secession has meant historically, right? Which I'm trying to think, have there been peaceful secessions? I'm the historian, I should know this, right? Maybe the fact that I don't know this means that there haven't been any. Scary. And we know about our secession, that sure wasn't peaceful.
Right.
And nothing I would ever want my son or myself to be 1,000 miles from. The Civil War in the United States is the last place you ever want to be in history. Ladies and gentlemen, listen to me on that one, right? So if we're going to do it, I'm not into it if it's going to look anything like that. If there's any threat whatsoever of the United States doing what the Union did to the Confederacy, ain't happening for me. I'm leaving. And I'm not participating. And I'm sure as hell not letting you take my son into your conscript army. So, yeah, we got to think hard about that. But I am a secessionist, of course. I want like every goddamn town to secede if possible, But we got to think about that. And that's all about, what's interesting. We just got to think about like I don't even know. It's an interesting question. Like, would Trump be more or less likely to allow that? I think he'd be more likely to allow it.
And yeah, it's interesting. I could see if Trump wins in November, secession coming from the left.
He would let it happen. I think there's a chance with Trump, whereas there's no way the Democrats and Republicans could not do that. They would not do that. That's like constitutionally impossible for them. I mean, like in their character. They are characterologically incapable of allowing secession. That's the DNA of those parties. They will not fucking allow that. But Trump is totally not of either party. So, and I could see him not giving a shit because he doesn't give a shit. That's the beautiful thing about the man. He doesn't give a shit about these sacred principles, right? So, I could totally see like, I don't know, some wackadoodles in Idaho manage to, get 80% of the population to, pass some measure establishing themselves as the United Republic of Idaho.
Mm-hmm. Can we call Brexit a peaceful secession?
I could see Trump going along with that. I could see him shrugging it off, maybe. I don't know. Like, especially if he's never been there. That's it. We need to pick the states where Trump has never been. Are there any states? I don't know. Or like he doesn't, or that he's like clearly doesn't care about. He's not an outdoorsman. I don't think he'd care about Idaho. I think he'd let that one go. So we need to pick a state like that. Or like I don't want to, this would be rough. I'm sure he wouldn't care that much about Oklahoma.
Yeah.
But I don't want to live there. That's the only problem. Idaho is better. It's way more pretty. Sorry, you were saying?
Can we call Brexit a peaceful secession?
Oh, no. They didn't get that far. They were not. They were still a sovereign nation, I think. I mean, I know hardcore Brexiters disagree with me and think it was like a total takeover. But come on, dudes. It was not. I mean, they had their own military. They completely were sovereign in domestic policy.
Sure.
And foreign policy. Well, not foreign. Well, no one in Europe is sovereign, but I mean, on their vis-a-vis their European neighbors, they were sovereign in foreign policy. Like the French didn't tell the English what to do with their air force. The United States told them what to do with their air force, but they weren't beholden to Brussels, right? Is what I meant. Nah, good, close, but we want a Brexit. Yes.
Yeah, that's what we would prefer. Sure.
We want it to look just like that, except without Parliament snatching it away from us, which happened to Brexit, right? So, they tried it. They did snatch it away, and then they got it back. But anyway, yeah, we want a Brexit.
Has this whole mess with the lockdowns and the masks and everything? This is fun now. No pun intended. Has it unmasked any personality quirks of people where you thought, man, that seems like my friend is kind of an authoritarian, but before this stuff, maybe just hints of it, and now you're like, my God, this person is much crazier than I thought. Have you seen that?
Let's see. In terms of friends, no. Family, totally. But I'm just trying to think. Yeah, but like not anyone really close to me. My girlfriend, thank God, has a super sensible attitude about it. Basically, exactly mine. We just walk around complaining about it all the time. We're total anti-maskies and have been from the beginning. But the thing I'm going to say is that I was surprised. What surprised me is that a lot of libertarians, I think, kind of towed the line on masking and quarantine and the lockdowns, and I was disappointed and surprised that a lot of libertarian friends were not as hostile to the lockdown as I was.
Interesting. Is it still that way?
Yeah, I'm a radical fringe, even among like the libertarians. Like they think I'm weird on this. Yeah, a lot of them. I can sort of feel it, and I can see it. I mean, I don't see people aren't talking like me. I'm definitely out there on the edge on this one.
Wow.
And I have been the whole time.
Yeah.
Like I've been hardcore skeptic since the beginning. So okay, here's my position. So yes, it's killing people. Yes, it's deadly for certain people, but it's only killing people over 70 and or very ill. And so all we needed to do was protect that population and the rest of society be free. That's fucking simple. And we did just the opposite. So it's so simple, but the policy never made any sense whatsoever from the beginning. And it may have done more harm than good by forcing people into confined spaces like those goddamn nursing homes in New York State. So many people. I think what's the percentage of, like nursing home death in New York is like something like a third of all the United States deaths.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. I've seen authoritarianism arise, but people trusted the government too much from the beginning, who were usually anti-statists. That's what really disappointed me. Yeah.
Well, I've taken up a lot of your time here, and this has been awesome. Before we go, plug away what you got coming up on Are You Live and your social media presence, all of it.
Yeah, well, I'm on Twitter all the time and causing lots of trouble there. But everyone should go to renegadeuniversity.com and join level 1 membership is only $49, or you can buy higher level memberships. But if you do that, you get a weekly access to the Are You Live shows, which Buck has been a part of, which are a complete blast. It's a guest I have on with me, and it's a Zoom meeting by video. And you can participate or not. You can just hang out and watch without even being seen if you want. But every Tuesday night, and that's part of the deal, Renegade University. But then we have a whole slate of courses there that you can watch, video courses on a host of topics. I teach a course on postmodernism, which is our most popular course, and a course on Nietzsche, taught by Dana Cohn from UC Berkeley, which is our second bestseller. And we have a bunch of courses on World War II, foreign policy with Scott. Several courses by Scott on there. People love. So Renegade University is growing all the time. It's really exciting. And then I got Unregistered Podcast, which comes out Mondays, and it's interview format, sort of like the Joe Rogan show, but with my own slant. And I have tons of amazing guests and recent episodes with Bridget Fedesky, the comedian and political commentator in LA, was on Joe Rogan recently. Got a lot going on. It's all fun though.
Yes, I can second that. I will link to all of that in the show notes page for this episode. Thaddeus, man, thanks for being here. This has been great.
Thanks, Buck. Hope to see you soon.
What a good chat I had with Thaddeus Russell. I'm stoked to have had him here on the show. I hope you guys enjoyed that. As for the Death to Tyrants podcast, where can you find me? What about Facebook? Facebook.com/Death to Tyrants podcast. Twitter @BuckRebel, BuckRebel. And here's the cool one. Patreon.com/Death to Tyrants. If you become a Patreon donor, all you got to do is just donate $1 a month. I mean, you can do more than that, sure. But just $1 gets you into the club. And about once a month or so, I'm going to record an episode of this podcast only for the Patreon donors. And speaking of that, after this is done here, this episode, in a mere seconds away from right now, I'm going to play you a little clip of the most recent episode that's exclusively for my Patreon donors, and I think you're going to like it. So head on over there, like I said, patreon.com/Death to Tyrants. Just sign up, donate a little bit. I promise you every penny I receive on there goes right back into this show because I've got the best producers in the game. Podsworth Media over at podsworth.com. If any of you listening are starting up a podcast or want to get that going, well, they are the best producers in the game. They produce the Tom Woods Show, Murphy Show, and obviously Death to Tyrants. So head on over to podsworth.com and check out what they have to offer. They are the best. And y'all are the best. Until next week, have a great one.
You get split in fucking half, but I call the hologram graph. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. but I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Like the sound of the Death to Tyrants podcast? Our audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com. Hey, you guys, I've mentioned a few times that there's going to be some episodes recorded of the Death to Tyrants podcast exclusively for my Patreon donors over at patreon.com/death2tyrants. That's where you can sign up to become a donor. Well, I want to play you a clip from the first one we did. It was really fun. It was myself, my co-host for the episode, Bobby Pearson from the Not For Everyone podcast, and I think you'll enjoy it. All right, here we go. Here's a clip. You know, the music community as a whole, here in Austin at least, they don't totally share our worldview, certainly our politics. And it's interesting, they're not always well-educated on politics, yet they can be quite vocal on political issues. I'm sure you guys have seen that on Facebook, and that's kind of what we're going to get at in this episode. I know you scroll through your Facebook feed, and I've kind of tailored mine so hardcore now that it's almost all libertarians. But I think a lot of us, and before you got off of Facebook, Bobby, would scroll through the timeline and you'd see like, oh, that sounds cool. Tom Woods group. Oh, that's an interesting point. Oh, that's an interesting point too. I never thought of, don't totally agree with that. And then all of a sudden, what is that?
Right.
And it's a musician. Or maybe if you guys are not musicians or in that circle, who knows, a friend from high school or something like that. And you're like, oh no. And at this point, I think a lot of us have learned, what's the point of even going back and forth? It's going to turn into a yelling match, meaning all caps, of course, and one of us probably on the libertarian side of things being called a Nazi or a homophobe or something along those lines that basically means I don't have an argument and I'm going to call you a bad name.
And as far as musicians go, what I've always said is they have the politics of a public school teacher with the ego of a musician.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to their intellectual credit. And I think I would argue that a lot of these people spend a lot of time, partying, doing drugs, sitting in their echo chamber, talking, and not exactly becoming as self-sufficient as they once thought that they would become following their dreams.
Right.
And then you kind of fall into this whole like, well, who is to blame other than myself mentality?
Yep.
Is it capitalism? Is it the patriarchy? Is it the fact I don't have health care because there's no universal health care in the United States and this is an injustice? Like those kind of things kind of are like this perfect storm of this mentality, right?
Yes, exactly right. And I think it's almost a defense mechanism where, like you said, you find yourself in this spot at almost 50 and you still have what you had at 25.
Yeah.
And it's like, where do I look besides in the mirror for whose fault this is?
When your hero's journey of success like plateaus, or like the cliche is like you talk about those people you grew up with, the townies that peaked in high school or whatever.
Yep.
But at least those people are like on heroin and selling insurance,
Yeah, that's right.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
It's like they're functioning junkies.
Yep.
Why can't you be too?
Yeah.
But the musician, the artist spirit is something that I think we need. And it is an interesting and necessary tool to speak truth to power. But I think in our current culture, it's been co-opted by like rank and file Hillary Clinton, fat records, not my president kind of like binary one-dimensional thinking.
Yes.